As you can see, I have this titled Inspiring Philosophies 10 Reasons Debunked. I hope you guys can read this. But nevertheless, we're going to go in order of his video, 10 to 1. And let's just go ahead and jump right into that. So his first biblical problem for young earth creationism, was Genesis 17:17, which I have quoted here for you guys on the screen. It says, quote, "And Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? End quote. So that's the quotation. The claim then from Inspiring Philosophy was Abraham believes it is impossible for a 100-year-old man to have a child. I notice it says here to a child, so I guess that was a little bit of a typo on my part. We can go ahead and fix that right now. Abraham believes it is impossible for a 100-year-old man to have a child, even though his ancestors and own father have done so in the YEC model. This is the claim, and this is, according to Inspiring Philosophy, the 10th problem, biblical problem for young earth creationism that he presents in his video, at least, right? It's the one he has numbered number 10. And just to repeat it one more time, Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, will the son be born to a man who is 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? Claim Abraham believes it is impossible for a 100-year-old man to have a child, even though his ancestors and own father have done so in the YEC model. Now, you can see here on the, I guess it's the right side. It is for me, at least. I don't know if it is for you guys. A little chart of a literal understanding of the patriarchs' ages. Right, Adam lives to be 930, Seth 912, Enos 905, Canaan 910, so on and so forth, all the way down. And you can also see here, this is the age of the earth since creation. And then on the other side is the age also since creation, but at the time that their first child is born, right? So a lot of these guys are over a century old by the time that they are having children. So why is it that Abraham believes a 100-year-old man cannot have a child, considering the fact that Adam has a child at 130 and so on and so forth, right? What seems to be the logic here? So my objection to the claim was as follows. Age is shown to dramatically and progressively fall after the flood. It says C chart here, so I'll go ahead and explain myself in just a moment. But to continue forward, it should therefore be expected that medicinal issues such as infertility or ED are happening earlier than they previously had in the antediluvian patriarchs' lives. This trend downward was known to the people living at the time, as illustrated by Genesis 47:9, which says, quote, Pharaoh said to Jacob, how old are you? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have the days of the years of my life been, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage, right? So scripture actually is aware of the progressively declining age at which people are able to bear children and at which people are dying. And Genesis 47:9, I think, is the most, clear example of this, with Jacob just outright saying, hey, yeah, I know that you guys think I'm old, being 130 years old, but you have no idea how old can actually get. My fathers, being grandfather and father and so on and so forth, lived far beyond the age that I'm currently attaining. And if you look at the chart that is on the right-hand side, you can actually kind of see that, colored out for you, right? Adam is 930 when he passes. We have Seth at 912, Enos 905, Canaan 910, 895 from Mahalalel, Jared 962. Enoch is a little bit of an outlier, but he doesn't actually die. Scripture says that he walked with God and he was not, for God took him, right? So 3865. But then it goes back up to Methuselah, 969. Lamech's life is cut short by the flood, 777, if not by the flood, at least around the flood. And then Noah lives to be 950, right? So you have this, I didn't actually do the math here, but the median age here has got to be somewhere in the 900s, right? 950, 969, 962, 910, 905, 912, 930, with the exception of two outliers in Enoch and Lamech, one who dies because of the flood, or at least something related to the flood. He dies around that era, right? And the other being not actually killed, but translated. seemingly, into heaven. With those two exceptions noted, the only one who doesn't make it to 900 years old is Mahalalel, who lives to be 895. He's a whopping 5 years off, right? But then after the flood, we see this drop in lifespan, and pretty dramatically, right? Shem is 600 years old when he passes. Noah was 950. 350 years is a really long time. To put it in perspective for you, my friends, July 4th, 1776 is when the United States of America was supposed to have been founded, right? I say supposed to have because, some of the people signed on January the 2nd and other people July, not January, way off. July the 2nd, other people on July the 5th. And also, you could argue that America wasn't really founded until 1788 when the Constitution was put into play. But nevertheless, 1776 is what people will say, right? Well, it's 2024 right now, and though I was saying January, it's not yet July, which is the actual month that the Declaration of Independence was signed. Meaning we're actually not quite yet 250 years removed from the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We'll be, Lord willing, hitting the 250-year anniversary this July the 4th. So add another 100 years onto that, and that is the drop-off from Noah's lifespan to Shem's lifespan, right? Goes from 950 to 600. So that would be 1676 for those of you who may be mathematically challenged. That's the distance from where we are currently at. And by the way, actually, I just did my math wrong. It'd be 1674 because I said 250. It actually would be the 248-year anniversary because I'm just all over the place today, and I do apologize for that. So massive drop-off. And then from Shem to Arphaxad, we see another pretty substantial drop-off, right? Arphaxad lived to be 438 years old, which is 162 years less than what Shem lives to. After him, you have Salah and Eber, who live around the same time. Salah a little bit less, 433. Eber a little bit longer, 464. But none of them is reaching that 600-year mark. In fact, none of them is even reaching that 500-year mark. Only one of the three is even reaching the 450-year mark. So again, dramatic drop from where Shem is at. And Shem himself is already a dramatic drop from where his father Noah is at. And recall, Noah is living pretty consistently with, as far as age is concerned, with the rest of his forefathers, right? Not a single one of these guys, with the sole exception of Mahalalel, is not making it to 900 years old, barring some kind of unforeseen circumstances like God taking him with a flood happening, right? Then from Salah from Eber down to Peleg, you see yet another dramatic drop-off over 200 years, in fact, 225 to be exact. So for those who would like to know, okay, when is 225 years ago on our calendar, that would be, if I'm doing my math correctly, 1799, right? That's how long of a time Peleg is getting knocked off of his life in comparison to Eber, right? With Reu being the same amount of time, 239, and Serug being the same amount of time, or excuse me, a little bit less, at 230. And then after him, you have yet another pretty substantial drop-off, 82 years. Nahor lives to be 148. Terah actually lives relatively, we'll say, the same general age range. He hits 200 at least, as Serug did, being 205. And then Abraham is 175, and from then on, there's not a single other individual, at least that I know of, who actually attains the age of 200. And it even continues to decrease from there, right? Isaac lives a little bit longer than Abraham does, but Jacob makes it to 147. By the time you get to Moses, he's only about 120. I believe, if I remember correctly, David is like 90 when he dies. So you can see the age dramatically and progressively tapering off as we get further and further away from the flood. And it starts at that flood point, right? And again, this is known within the pages of Scripture. Jacob says, and I quote from Genesis 47:9, how old are you? Pharaoh said to Jacob, how old are you? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have the days of the years of my life, have been, the days of the years of my life. And they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers, in the day of their pilgrimage, right? So it makes sense that by Abraham's time, he is not expecting to be fertile or to live as long as the antediluvian patriarchs were. But in my opinion, this objection that IP raises actually gets worse. I think that IP completely misses the point of Abraham's objection. While what I presented here, I think clearly demonstrates why a man of 100 in Abraham's time is not comparable to a man of 200 in Terah's, or a man of 900 in Noah's, for that matter. I think it must also be noted that IP's argument just plainly misses the point of Abraham's objections. Let me quote again, but with a point of emphasis here. Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? And I'm putting the emphasis there on will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90. Why would I be doing that? Is that me trying to like selectively quote this text, or is there a reason to emphasize that? Well, we know this is the main concern of the couple because the barrenness of Sarah, and later matriarchs for that matter, this is a consistent theme throughout Scripture, is a recurring topic throughout the book of Genesis, and we're going to actually show you multiple verses which demonstrate as much on the next slide. By the way, just from a scientific standpoint, this makes perfect sense, as according to the National Institute on Aging, quote, the menopausal transition most often begins between ages 45 and 55, and on the end quote, and on the flip side of that, quote, it's been shown sperm counts do decline with age, but men never stop producing sperm, end quote. The source there is a Dr. Larry Lipschultz, who is a professor of urology at Baylor College of Medicine. So, in theory, now mechanical problems do tend to happen, like sperm count does decrease with age, as they just said. You can also run into problems of erectile dysfunction, where you're not actually able to achieve any sort of a release to try and be, not so explicit with it. But barring mechanical issues like that, it is theoretically possible for a man to have children at the age of 100. It's not very likely, but it is possible. And in fact, to give you an example of this happening, because it's not just theoretically possible, it does happen in history. It's not 100, it's in his 70s, but the famous director of Star Wars, George Lucas, actually fathered a child by surrogate, but using his own sperm in his 70s. I believe the child is 10, 11 years old, something along those lines right now. And he was born in 1944, right? So it's totally possible. On the flip side of that, of course, women tend to have a pretty short shelf life. I hope that's not an offensive way to put it, in regards to their fertility, right? Some women will hit menopause in their 30s even. And in fact, the earliest I have ever been personally familiar with is 35. Some people might even know a woman who has hit menopause before that. And of course, it can be significantly later than that as well. The National Institute on Aging, in its quotation, says that it can be between the ages of 45 and 55. But the point is, at that point, I mean, think of 45, right? A woman living to the age of 90 is not unheard of. So that means halfway, at the literal middle point of her life, right? Halfway into her existence, she is no longer able to have children. Whereas as a male, theoretically speaking, you can have children until the very day that you pass. And that's assuming you live a very long and healthy life, right? So it makes sense scientifically speaking that the main concern would be Sarah and not Abraham, because Sarah, being a woman, is of course going to have a shorter period of time during which she can bear children than Abraham can, being that he is a man, right? And further, Sarah has thus far borne no children, despite being 90 years old. Abraham, on the other hand, is already a father by the time that this prophecy is given to him in Genesis 17:17. His son Ishmael was born back in Genesis 16. If our math is correct, he should be about 13 years old, because I believe that Abraham is 87 at the time of Ishmael's birth. He should be about 13 years old at the time that Isaac is born. And I think this is about a year before that, so he'd be about 12 years old at the time that Abraham is giving this objection, right? So Abraham already knows that his mechanics work, at least according to Genesis, if we're going to be internally consistent, right? But Sarah is 90 years old and she has not had any children up until this point. And by the way, scripture says specifically that she is past the menopause point, right? I think I have it up here, but if not, I'll go ahead and pull it up for you guys. Here is a couple of different quotations that demonstrate the recurring theme of Sarah's barrenness. Quote, but Sarai was barren, she had no child, end quote, Genesis 11:30. Quote, now Sarai, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, end quote, Genesis 16:1, specifically portion A, which, by the way, is the entire reason that Ishmael is born anyway, right? Because she says, I can have children through Hagar, my handmaid. So he gives Abraham Hagar. He goes into her, and they end up having a child. In the idea is supposed to be that Ishmael is by surrogate Sarah's child, but of course it doesn't work out that way. Next quote, therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also, end quote. That's Genesis 18:12. Quote, and Sarah said, God has made me laugh, and all who will hear will laugh with me. She said, she also said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? For I have borne him a son in his old age, end quote. And even in the New Testament, and this is where we see the reference to menopause, Hebrews 11:11, quote, by faith Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child when she was past the age. Say that again, when she was past the age. In other words, she was postmenopausal, right? So she had been barren her entire life, even before menopause, but now she is actually postmenopausal. She's not getting her menstrual cycle anymore, in other words, because she judged him faithful who had promised, end quote. And this is not even an exhaustive list, by the way, right? So scientifically speaking, it makes perfect sense. We also see, due to the progression of age downward, it makes perfect sense. But also, the recurring theme of Sarah's barrenness is just everywhere. And on the flip side, the theme of Abraham's barrenness isn't even a thing. It just doesn't exist. Abraham had Ishmael at the age of 87, 13 years before Isaac. He has multiple other children by Keturah after Isaac is born and Sarah passes away. So IP completely misses the point here. And I think he misses the point because it does indeed say, shall I, being 100 years old, bear children? But contextually, we can figure out pretty conclusively, we can establish pretty conclusively, I should say, that Abraham's concern is not his own fertility and his own age, but Sarah's fertility and her age, right? Why we have the reference to his own age, I guess I'm not entirely sure. But again, couple these things together. The fact that Sarah has always been barren, the fact that she is postmenopausal, the fact that menopause is something that affects women much earlier in their lives, the fact that men can theoretically have children up until their dying day, the fact that Abraham has already had a child in his old age, namely Ishmael, and will have children in the future, and the fact that we have the progressive declining of ages from the point of the flood, I think we can say pretty conclusively that IP's objection number 10 misses the